This community program would not be possible without the financial support of our corporate sponsors and community members. Tri-Cities Community Television would like to especially thank the cities of Port Moody, Coquitlam, and Port Coquitlam for their belief and support of community television. If you wish to be part of our volunteer team, become a sponsor, or make a financial contribution to support community programming, please feel free to contact us at the following locations.
Hi, it's Cathy Cena here with Tri-Cities Community TV. We're in downtown Port Coquitlam at the beautiful Lee Square. And my guest today is Joyelle Brandt, and we're going to be talking about PTSD, something a little different than what you normally have heard of. And Joyelle, thank you so much for being here today, and I appreciate your story, and I'm looking forward to hearing how did you find out that you had PTSD?
Hi, Cathy. Thanks for having me here today. I'm so happy to talk about this topic. It's something that is really not as well known as it should be. Mm-hmm. When we talk about PTSD, what we're normally used to associating that with is veterans who are coming back from combat. And the reason we associate that is because a lot of people have done some really great work raising awareness in the last few years about that. However, there are many people who suffer from PTSD, and veterans are actually only a small portion of the people who live with PTSD on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. So you're parenting with PTSD. We talked a little bit earlier, and it was hard for you, you know, when you were a younger mom and you're raising your children and these things were happening to you. Can you explain to some of us what kind of emotions were going through you, and how did you find out that it was PTSD even? I mean, you must have been really a lot of anguish. Why are you acting a certain way? What's going on? You just want to love your children, and now you're living with PTSD as you're raising your two young kids.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that.
You know, it's a situation whenever you have a situation where you can tell that your emotional reaction to it is completely out of proportion with what's actually happening, mm-hmm. There's a trigger there. And that's what I first started calling it. I would say I was triggered. For example, when my son was 2 and he went through a hitting phase, I was holding him during a block party and he slapped me across the face. And that would be upsetting for anybody, of course. Sure. Mm-hmm. But the reaction that I had was instantaneous. It was like I was a child again myself. And I had to hand off my child, and I ran off, and I just started sobbing uncontrollably. And I could tell that the reaction I was having was really intense. And I kept having these moments like this where I would have flashbacks to my own abuse as a child and not know how to deal with it, because when you live with this over a lifetime, you learn some coping mechanisms. Mm-hmm. So before kids, I was able to, walk away from a situation that was triggering me, or find some way to numb myself so that I didn't have to, or distract myself. Mm-hmm. And when you have children and you're alone with them 24/7, there's no walking away from that.
There isn't. You're responsible. You have to raise these children. At 2 years old, he can't be left alone, and you couldn't cope the same way that you did before pre-children. Now, mm-hmm. You talked about abuse a little bit. How old were you when you were abused?
I was 9 years old.
9 years old. And probably didn't really know what was going on back then either. I mean, did you think that was the norm, or it was someone that you trusted, or how did this all come about?
Abusers really are masterful at secrecy, and they will convince children that they should not tell because then the child will get in trouble. Mm-hmm. And so my abuser had told me stories about how if I ever told, that I would get in trouble. And I believed him, of course, because they are masterful manipulators.
And how long have you been talking about your story?
About 3 years now.
3 years?
Yeah.
How did you decide that this is something that you wanted to share with people?
I started out by talking about my postpartum depression that I experienced after my second son. Mm-hmm. And I realized that depression was directly related to my childhood abuse. Mm-hmm. And once I started talking to people and sharing more about what I was going through, I would have so many people come up and tell me that they've been through this too. So that started with talking about postpartum depression and hearing, me too, me too. And I kept thinking to myself, there's got to be other people out here who are also survivors of childhood abuse, and where are they? And,
Right.
and why aren't we talking about this?
Right, where are they? And so through those findings, and you called these triggers, for a long time, and you finally came to that realization, and you read an article, you said, a few years ago, and this was Dawn's article, right?
It was. So I met Dawn online through this article she'd written for the website Scary
Not online
Mommy.
dating, you met her
Not
online. This was
dating,
a
not that
completely
kind of
different,
online.
right. I'm trying to lighten the mood a little bit because I'm going to get a tissue in a second. So yes, you met Dawn
Yes.
online, go ahead.
So she had an article called Raising a Girl as a Survivor. And she had talked about one of her moments when she was triggered as a parent. And she would say, grown men would come up to her daughter and say things like, "Aren't you so pretty?" And Dawn would have that immediate reaction that was so, as she realized, out of proportion with what was happening in the moment.
Right.
Because she has also survived childhood sexual abuse. And in that moment of pure fight, flight, freeze response comes up and takes over your body.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So time went on, and you and Dawn, you said, met this past year.
We
But
did.
but just before that, you decided to put together not only your stories are in parenting with PTSD, but also the stories of other women. Like you found other people that were suffering from this. What do you call it? It's not a syndrome. Is it a disease? What would you tell people what it actually stands for? And if
Right.
you know the definition of PTSD, we don't want to assume that everybody knows it. But go ahead.
Exactly.
Yes.
So most people who are survivors of childhood abuse live with something called complex post-traumatic stress disorder.
Okay.
And that means that it can show up in a lot of different ways, of course. But it means that your nervous system never learned how to regulate properly because you lived through trauma as a child. And so some people actually describe it as more of a brain disorder because it impacts the way you grow and develop. So you might have a heightened response to things. You might be overly sensitive to sudden noises. I, to this day, cannot stand being blocked into a room and not being able to see my exit. And that's a completely primal response that is not based in any kind of logical response to what's are actually around me. So that's an example of what it's like living with complex PTSD.
Okay, so you found Dawn online, and
I did.
you guys sort of collaborated, and you said to her, let's write a book.
I did, and she was so incredibly brave. I read her article, and I went to bed that night thinking about it, and I woke up the next morning, and I just couldn't get out of my mind. Because at the end of her article, she had written what I had been thinking, which is, why is nobody talking about this?
Exactly, and like you said, we talked earlier, and PTSD, I just think of veterans, people in the military, and what they're going through, and their sort of rehabilitation back into into society. I never imagined that people like us, I suffer from anxiety myself, and I'm sure that's all part of all of this. Now, you met Dawn this past year.
I did in
Yes,
April for the
and-
first time after 3
And
years.
she's in
together.
New York, right?
So she lives in New York, so we have been collaborating for the last 3 years over phone and text and internet and Skype, and it was amazing. And getting to meet her in person, it was like meeting a sister I never knew I had.
Well, that's incredible. What a fantastic bond. Where can people find this book, Joyelle, if they are suffering from PTSD, or even if they think they are, and maybe this is an answer to them? A lot of people
Yes.
struggle internally with not knowing what's going on.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and so maybe this can solve some of that for them. So you told me you're going to be going on to Amazon.
We will. So if you visit parentingwithptsd.com,
Okay.
we will have a newsletter sign up on there, and you will get a link to download the book for free the first day it comes out, which will be sometime in October.
That's fantastic. Are you thinking about putting this in chapters at all? Did you have a local authors kind of section there? Have you thought about that?
Right, yes, yes. So many things to get done over the next few
I'm
weeks
sure,
to get
I'm
it ready
sure.
for release.
And you're a full-time mom, so I don't want to put too much pressure on you. So let's hear that website again, please.
So it's parentingwithptsd.com.
parentingwithptsd.com. Today you have heard from Joyelle Brandt, and very brave woman who came out not knowing what was wrong, but through a lot of research and support from different women in her life, of course her spouse too, and hopefully things are a little different at home with her children, and she found out that she's parenting with PTSD. Thanks so much, Cathy Cena with Tri-Cities Community.
This community program would not be possible without the financial support of our corporate sponsors and community members. Tri-Cities Community Television would like to especially thank the cities of Port Moody, Coquitlam, and Port Coquitlam for their belief and support of community television. If you wish to be part of our volunteer team, become a sponsor, or make a financial contribution to support community programming, please feel free to contact us at the following location.